Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Faith and Friends. We're here for our conversation this week, talking about commerce and community, which we kind of got started already with our keynote. And I think we'll be able to make some connections with the keynote, especially towards the end of our time together today. But also with especially the conversation that we hope to see unfold in the forum around the keynote, questions of commerce and community and how that exchange is related and whether we can see those things as of a piece. So in my house lately, spending a lot more time with my family, and over the weekend, I actually took a 3-day weekend where I didn't check email and things like that. And I think the kids really enjoyed it. I mean, the parents enjoyed it to some degree, but with 3 kids, I'm 6 and under in the house, you enjoy is a relative term. But I think the kids really enjoyed it. And then, Monday morning rolled around and I can't remember if it was Eleanor, my middle child, or the oldest, who said, "Why do you have to work?" And I thought, what a perfect question to be asking right now, especially because my work to them may not even look like work. I come in here to this room where I have a desk set up, and they see me in here doing seemingly the same thing all day long. And sometimes they hear me talking in here, and sometimes they don't. And they come beating on the doors and trying to figure out why in the world is Dad doing what he's doing in there. And, I think we've had 2 conversations. The second one unfolded at our breakfast table today. The first, though, it's centered on this. So this was, I can't remember, we got this book fairly recently, but it's something that maybe some of you have seen before. I mean, Richard Scarry's been around for a while. This is a golden book, I think. And he even has cartoons and things, right? And in Richard Scarry's world, especially in this book, the thing that he's trying to explain is basically how an economy functions, right? So here you see just kind of a cutaway view of a town, and there are people doing all kinds of things, right? There's taxi driver and people working in and on the streets and in the sewers and in houses and office buildings, and you get a sense that people do things all day long and you don't really still know why they do it. You just know that they do it. Once you get into this, though, you start the very first place this all starts, and I think that this is telling, right, is everyone's a worker, but the first worker that you see is the farmer riding his tractor, right? And as we get into this, that is the thing that populates a lot of the pages. There's a thing about bread, there's a thing about clean water, but this first little scene, it shows that the farmer, he does his work and he grows his food, right? And he takes it to the grocer and sells his food directly to the grocer in this story, right? There's no middle person, no Kroger family distribution behemoth, right? It's just the farmer goes to the market, sells his stuff, takes the money, buys the clothes that he needs for his family, and I think he needs a new tractor, a new truck. Eventually he needs a new truck, I know, in the story. I don't think that happens here yet. But I think the missus got some fine earrings here. You can see that look, I think, like egg beaters. I'm not totally sure. That kind of kitschy, but I guess that's her style. And in any case, right, this is how we kind of visualize an economy working for kids. So the idea is we all work for each other, in part because we all need things from each other. But it gets a little tricky once you get into certain elements of the economy, those pieces that the 3 guys you see sitting here inhabit, for one thing, right? I mean, you guys wanted this education, right? So sure, yeah, you might think that we should get some money for this. What you're paying for, sometimes maybe you don't know. But in any case, I think this is the simple piece, right? The idea is, here is the ideal setup. We all do work for each other, and that work we appreciate, and money is the mediator. So in our exchanges, we use money to kind of represent, I care about or I appreciate the work that you do. That's the best possible version of this, right? And so I think that it'd be interesting, I'd like to maybe invite Dr. G in on this. I think there's something here, right, that is talking a bit about like maybe social contracty stuff too, right? It feels like very original state of nature kind of approach here, right?
Yes. So we'll do a really condensed version, but if you think about the sort of philosophical underpinnings to that language of economy, you do have to go back and look at social contract theory, I think, at least in Europe and in England, starting with Hobbes to Locke to Rousseau and to Hume. And one of the interesting things that historically we don't think about is, and Hume does a good job of highlighting this, that's David Hume, he's a Scottish philosopher. There's a point in time where when you move away from the feudal system and you actually start getting what's called a middle class, they can own stuff. That was new. We sort of take it for granted that I can have a dartboard, like that's mine. I throw darts at it. But there's a time you didn't have stuff, you just worked to live. And what you had is whatever you could reap to survive. And so if you look at early social contract theory, it is fascinating to find out that the key foundation to all of it is how do we protect property? So a large scale government for Hobbes, because it's better than not having property. A representative sort of social contract like Locke, because that is one of the main rights, life, liberty, and property. And Hume even recognizes that's a foundation to justice. He uses the term justice for this, and that is that secure property first. And Rousseau has a take on that also. What's unfortunate is, in the case of people like Rousseau, maybe, and Hume, we do tend to view economy as a very negative thing. David Hume's best friend in Scotland is Adam Smith, who we call the father of modern capitalism, right? And I know I've got a student that's going to hate this. Love you, Jake. But there's a point where we do have to appreciate that Adam Smith isn't as bad as he sounds. So in your version,
my invisible hand.
Yeah, exactly. In your version, Dr. Cook, you do present this beautiful, hey, I'm working for you. This is about you, the community. And that's not what Smith says, right? He says the candlestick maker and the bread maker work together out of self-interest. I need bread, you need candles. We make a trade, we monetize it, we do a thing. The problem is people stop reading Smith and Hume after that and fail to account that in their theories of economy, they both also made statements, and I think Smith says it best, that yes, the invisible hand or self-interest motivates the market, but justice is the crown jewel of society, right? That we often miss the other piece, that this was supposed to be about the people. Hume's idea of property wasn't that property was its end-all be-all, it is just how we evolved. And it does, it starts sort of agrarian, moves industrial, makes these changes, and they're all supposed to make things better. Hume thought trade and commerce were great things because when asked about trade policy with the Far East in England, he said, we should do that. We don't just get silk when we trade with China, we get arts, we get new theories of government. We learn more and get more by that exchange. So the economy isn't always just about the money for people like Smith and Hume. It is about the exchange of knowledge, ideas, relationship. Yeah. And that is often not addressed either by Hume or Smith or any of those sort of political economic theorists.
I mean, that gets into how tricky it is. We use this term economy and we tend to think one thing. And I appreciate in our reading from Wendell Berry on Two Economies, how he starts to open that up for us. The idea is we often think in industrial economy terms, that what we're talking about is how it is that we break down different aspects of what we need, the work we need done. And just, money gets channeled these ways across a market, right? That's not the only way of talking about an economy. And what Barry's saying is that doesn't account for enough. We think of economy as all-encompassing, but especially when we start to hear in our own time, a time of isolation, coronavirus, people determining what is an essential business and a non-essential business, you start to see that, man, economy is not sufficient to account for all of life. We need more. We need a better, bigger picture of what's happening in the world. And how it is that we fit into it and the value we add and why we should be fed and all of those things. So it starts to show up some of the challenges of a system of money distribution or mediation that is focused entirely on industry. And one of the things that Barry says is, in the beginning, they muse about the possibility of thinking about energy as a way of assessing economy and how it is that we account for flows of energy. That's different from industry. And it also accounts for the human energy that we expend to do things, to do the work that we do. So you put time in, you get time out. And there are actually alternative economies out there. You might go Google search what a time bank is. And there are people that are piloting things like this where, you know, in a given community of people, somebody may be really gifted at one thing. Somebody may be a licensed electrician, and somebody else may be the best pastry baker you've ever had. And, you know, say I need electrical work done. I actually do right there. I have a short. I can do that myself, but somebody else who's a licensed could do it faster. Abigail is an excellent bakist. And so we could trade, right? In a sense, time spent on, bakist. Yeah, it's a word. And so we could trade time spent repairing this short that I have out here to time spent baking a cake, and figure resources that go into that, the actual things you need to make the job happen. And that's a different way of accounting for what is happening, right?
That's very common. I mean, especially as we're early in our lives, as we often tell our friends, you've got a bunch of college people available, right? They will help you move. All you have to do is buy the pizza. Mm-hmm. You exchange pizza for their helping you move. There's no money exchange. They've given time. You've spent money on the food if you've ordered it, right? And you make that exchange of goods and services. And that's what economy is. It's this exchanging of things and how they're structured. But as you say, what happens is sometimes something gets valued more highly in society than others. Like medicine right now, medical providers. My wife's a teacher. We're, of course, professors. And so it's interesting to see all the parents who are now teachers going, teachers need more money. Right? They're not paying them
more money to take kids.
how we value things in the economy is the challenge, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
and I mean, I think that you start to see in all of this, right, that even with the example of pizza and college students, I mean, whatever it is, the idea is in an economy, we try to take care of each other. I mean, in the best of all possible worlds, we want everybody to be cared for and everybody to have good work to do. And the idea is, you know, things might be best structured if they're structured in such a way that nobody gets excessively more than anybody could possibly need. And at very least, everybody has a minimum of ability to thrive, right? The things they need to do, if you're thinking about Maslow's hierarchy, right? Can we establish a baseline such that we value people enough that in this economy, they'll be able to live? And then we can ask questions about luxury on top of that, Adam Smith.
Yeah, I think the challenges to economy have always occurred over time when there have been problems. So when we go back 100 years, almost 100 years to the Great Depression, there were those who had sufficient and those who did not. And so those who did not went to places where any kind of work could be found. And so there's such an influx of demand for work that those who had work, and I'm thinking of my grandparents who were down in the southeast Kansas, coal mines and that, and dying of stuff, they were willing to work just to gain that money to get the bare essentials. Yeah. When everything is kind of even flux, economies work pretty well and even things out. The problem is when there is a crisis, a disruption like we have right now, where all of a sudden some things are more essential or simply have the ability to go on, and other things, there's no job, I need to go find work. So we have the mass migration out to California because work was to be had.
And gold was in their hills.
Mm-hmm.
I do think in the crisis kind of events, it highlights that weakness of Hume and Smith, because what we've done in the West is we've attached ourselves to a system of economy. And there are multiple systems of economy, not to go into all the other theories, but, you know, when you mention just the exchange of almost doing favors in an agrarian or agorist or voluntarist kind of manner. We're getting things done. We do things, but we didn't have to have it monetized, coined into a system. And so I think what becomes scary is and that's the thing I always struggle with when we talk about who, because it's not just about what's essential. We also make this negative value judgment of who's essential. And right now we get to say, see, your job at McDonald's wasn't that important. I don't know. And the other day when I chicken nugget, it's important, and so we make these value judgments where if we get outside of that system and think about the economy or the exchanges, true community and care for each other, then it's unfortunate we're seeing that system disruption make that change in judgment for us.
Yeah.
There's other ways of working together. We don't have to be beholden to a particular system. It's the one we have. And it has worked, as Dr. Harstein said, sort of a, even flow, even flux. It works. But now I think, can stand in a position to evaluate it more seriously if we want to talk about care for people.
So, Dr. Cook Jacob, our friend, what is the real difference between, I think, the industrial economy and the great economy that he's talking about? What is where's it come down and create the friction at?
Yeah, well, one of the things I think I appreciated, especially later in the essay, is when he's talking about the difference between preserving value and creating it. I think he delivers a pretty handy smackdown to those who conceive of business as value creation. And the industrial economy is sort of dependent upon this conception of what it's doing and why you should be giving us lots of money and why our shareholders should be given lots of money for investing in this kind of thing, because we're creating value for your lives. What ends up happening is the value that we pretend to be creating in that way is really always and only secondary to the values that are already there. There are values that we don't create that we need to preserve. For instance, life itself, the sustainability or the longevity of the natural world and its flows. It matters a lot to us, actually, that we have clean air to breathe. I mean, think about what an interesting time this is for the world when there's not so much smog. I've seen before and after pictures of places like Delhi, where the sky has been gray for decades, and it's blue right now. And people are like, I didn't realize the sky really was blue. I thought that was something people said in poems. It's nuts. But this idea that we're creating value can only ever be a recreation with the stuff that's already there somehow, and so I think that one of the things that talking about a great economy, the great economy, helps us do, capital G, capital E, right? The great economy, is we start talking about, we're trying to get a more and more encompassing way of accounting for everything, of valuing all that there is so that we don't unduly strain those systems for what were really short-term gains for us.
Yeah, I think what I enjoyed about it was his discussion. He used topsoil as the metaphor.
Yeah.
Topsoil takes decades and centuries to create. Things die, they're decomposed, the nutrition comes into there. And it's a real challenge, but the resource is not anything we can actually control. We, in the industrial economy, I think we try to use the resources and preserve for ourselves resources. In this economy, toilet paper is a huge resource we're trying to preserve, where all of a sudden there's this, but we can't create toilet paper. We can only buy up more than we actually will need for several years. And then the great economy says there's a greater benefit to allowing the cycle to take place rather than to simply use that. And as we move towards the end, it really becomes the importance of economy is not thinking in grand scales, but really thinking in personal scales.
Yeah.
The economy is fine as long as I am not affected. The economy is bad if I'm affected. And that's why it's such a big deal. But the idea of topsoil and those other things really came home to me because my grandfather in Ohio was a dairy farmer. And as a kid, I went out and we went to the farm once. That's our vacation, 1 week vacation. That's all my dad had in the 60s. Pile everybody in the car, drive, camp on the outside, camp somewhere, or stay with a relative for a night and get to Ohio. Took 3 days to get there. We were there 2 days, 3 days to get back, so dad could go back to work. But it was this kind of ideal scenery for me. And so have some images that I want to go ahead and share with the group here. But one of the things, this is a picture taken from an airplane of the farm. You can see the big barn, and it was destroyed by a tornado later on. The big farmhouse that was so fun to explore, where my uncle lived and shared the farming, and the pig pen and the chicken coop and all sorts of things. But a very lush, green hills and lots of trees. Had the dairy cattle would go out, and here was the orchard where the Shetland pony would try and knock me off the lower branches. But that's a whole other story. We won't go there. So recently, with some deaths in the family, I've been back and I took a picture of what it looks like now. And so we have the barn, which has been rebuilt because of the tornado, and we have this lovely hill because right here along the road that's always been there, my uncle got this half and my granddad sold the other half. And they started strip mining, and they strip mined for a while what was profitable, and then it shut down and there was no activity. And then when I came back, all of a sudden there's this ski mountain where you could actually put a ski lift up there and go. And there's been such a change because you have the hillside and the farmland, and then right across the road, this wasteland. And as I was getting ready to go back there for the first time in about 15 years, I went, of course, to everybody's favorite, Apple Maps, and did the satellite view of what that looked like. And we have driven around this, and this is the strip mining operation today, where this used to be farmland and people's farms and everything. Here's the barn here in the middle. And you have, this was the original part, and they've expanded, and you have to drive this big circle where you used to be able to take these small roads to visit different people's farms. Big circle has just been stripped of all the resources as they're trying to get all the coal and other quarrying materials out of there. And it's that kind of image that really came to mind as I was reading in Barry's book, is that we take things, and when we take things out of the economy looks like a strip mine. We have to have this exchange and use of resources where we're going back and forth and back and forth. And so that's kind of what I picked up from some of the things that he was talking about.
Yeah, I appreciate what he says about a considerate economy. The summary is to obtain maximum of well-being with the minimum of consumption. I feel like that butts up against so much of the mainstream culture around us. The possibility of being as simple as possible.
Well, they often describe us as a consumer economy.
Yeah.
We take and take and take, but we don't produce back. And I know in my class, I have a lot of zoo science students and people who are concerned about the economy and concerned about those things. And there are people who are equally concerned who are in business, right? But the thing is, when we look at the big picture, we lose the personal. And to be a consumer is to really be going, it's just about me and not about anyone else. And that's really where the challenge comes as we start moving forward, of what kind of person are we going to be in the economy? What are we going to put back into the economy? What are we going to contribute to our society, our civilization that is so codependent with each other?
Yeah, I know in our offline conversation, Dr. Harstein, you sort of highlighted how this all ties back to ethical decision making. And in business ethics, there's a model, it's called the triple bottom line, because most companies and organizations only look at the bottom line, the profit. And it's supposed to be profit, people, and the planet. And that, I like that little alliteration, but I still think it's backwards. I think it's got to be the people first. Then you can worry about the money. So it's got to be other directed. And just as you were talking and we are going deeper on the very text, I made a change again just because I like alliteration and I want to get the order right. But I think we want to think about economy and doing ethical decision making and thinking about others. It needs to be relationships first, revenue second. I mean, revenue does keep a company alive, right? You do have to have, you make money or you don't even exist as an organization. But then to tie it back to the theme of the course, like restoration, the restoration of the resources, that's what makes the planet sustainable. That's what makes your economy sustainable, when you can keep feeding it and building it back up, because that's part of what we're seeing when people talk about the haves and have nots. Unfortunately, we've, that image is powerful, Dr. Harstein, but we've kind of strip mined our own economy and our own people. We've not redone or retooled or repurposed our economy in decades. And I think we're seeing that highlighted right now.
Yeah.
I think there are some who are doing that. I mean, Barry's article was written in 1983.
Yeah.
And I remember 1983 because when he talks about
No, I
toxic
came out
waste, yeah, you have a little bit there, right? You have toxic waste, you have the nuclear problems in at 3 Mile Island, you have all these other things happening. But when we strip mine this, the question is, what can we bring back? And the focus of this class is we can bring back some virtue. Mm-hmm. And so Barry says towards the end, he says, the virtues cannot be practiced as such, as a virtue. Temperance has no appearance or action of its own. Justice, prudence, fortitude, faith, hope, charity, they can only be employed on occasions. He who would do good to another, William Blake said, must do it in minute or minute particulars. And so when we talk about beauty, goodness, and truth, we want to consume those. We want to have those. Those are things that are beneficial to us. The question is, how can we contribute those into our economy? How can we, what particular ways can we do that to contribute? And that makes things work, because I know we started a small thing. We made some, well, I reused something that had expired in 2015. It was a bar of chocolate. And so we made brownies and I melted it, put peanut butter, and we made this nice little dessert and shared it with lots of people. And then we got carrot cake in exchange for that, because someone made carrot cake. And then someone else wants to bring this. By contributing something, then all of a sudden it starts to change and we pay things forward, but we also reap benefits. So any kind of thoughts on that and wrapping up, Dr. Cook? Dr.
Yeah.
Page?
Well, I mean, I think that honestly, connecting with kind of the thing that I was trying to say in the keynote video, what you're saying about virtues, I mean, virtues, we often talk about them in disembodied ways. For instance, we have the RISE values at Friends, right? Those same values could be spelled out in a million different ways depending on the community you're in. And so it's significant to have a story that's telling you something about who you are and what the world is about. And it's that story that tells you what it means to embody, to really practice those virtues in the real world. And that's why it matters as we talk about economy and all that goes wrong in the world, right? And how we can contribute beauty, goodness, and truth to it. So it matters so much that you have a vision of those things. If we have no idea what that means to us, if we get too far down the road of life without having thought about that and how this really is meant to be lived out, we may never do it. Our values, our priorities will be set by everyone else. Our employer, the world around us, the media that we consume, whatever it is, right? And it can feel good and be beautiful and seem good to us all day long. But the trouble is when we really start to feel the conflict between the thing that we really care about and how our lives are in relation to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the stories are filled with people's stories who are empty. They're empty because they have taken and taken and taken. And the fullness actually comes in giving. You know, it's nice to receive, but I think the old saying is, it is better to give than to receive. Because I was very happy to share those brownies with the chocolate peanut butter topping so that I didn't have to consume those calories. I didn't expect anything back, but carrot cake, you know, it added calories back into my family system.
Yeah.
So it's better to give because you're doing things out of kindness. You reap a reward, and we have to be givers. We have to somehow contribute to the economy, or we're just slackers. We're just taking and taking and taking, and we're like leeches that suck and suck and suck, and nobody likes them. So kind of a strange way to go to the end of this, but
yeah, I was going to say that's a very nice closing thought there, Dr. Harstein.
blood-sucking leeches, yes, don't be one. I'm sure they have a benefit, but not for our discussion.
Amen. So go and be the opposite. What's the opposite of a leech? I don't know. A host? No.
No, be a contributor. Go and give. Contribute in action, small actions to the people you are around right now.
Yes.
Contribute to the economy you can.
Amen.